Hello, and welcome to the Partnership Projects NVR podcast, Season 3, Episode 6. This is a special edition. My name is Shila Desai.
And I'm Vasiliki Loumpa.
As you can hear, listeners, Peter's on holiday at the moment, so we have Vasiliki Loumpa, who is a family therapist. She's been involved in NVR with partnership projects for a number of years and is an independent practitioner. And she's also done a podcast for us in Season 2. So I think, we're really looking forward to today's topic. And before we continue that, just to announce to our listeners again, a very special one-day conference being held in Birmingham on the 12th of September, which is entitled Past, Present and Future of NVR. It's a low-cost conference, and there's still some availability for the remote online training. It's also a face-to-face training, so just have a look on the website for further details. So, Vasiliki, it's lovely to have you here today. I know last time you talked about young people and mental health, and really interested in kind of your topic or your thoughts for today.
So it's lovely to be here and to talk with you, Sheila. Thank you for offering the space. So what I was thinking of today was continuing with the topic of mental health, thinking about all these parents or professionals who sometimes come to our training and who are working with children who are not violent or parents of children who are not violent. And this has come to be a particular interest to me since my work in camps in the NHS with child and adolescent mental health for a long time, and also in my independent practice as a family therapist and supervisor. And also in my work with partnership projects, where we train also professionals, and that is something that comes up quite a lot. So what do we do when children aren't violent? Can you still use NVR is a question that people often ask.
And I guess when you're bringing that topic to today, it's a shift from the ideas from Aylmer, and it adds weight to the adaptations that Aylmer has made from those sort of externalized presentations where it's started in terms of young people with challenging behaviours, with aggressive outbursts and violence, the child-to-parent violence, or young people that are out at night time, getting involved in criminal activity, that you're describing a very different sort of presentation where in which NVR is now being used more and more. So what is it that you've kind of learned in your practice about how NVR has been adapted for young people who aren't violent, who have other struggles?
This has been quite a journey, really. It's about 2015 where I first tried to adapt some of this together with the parents that we were working with and thinking about NVR and what can they take from this approach with their young people who sometimes had suicidality or struggled with suicidal thoughts or high anxiety or eating disorders. And learning, I love that you use the word learning because they've taught me a great deal about how to make those adaptations along with colleagues who've been doing a lot of work in this area. And I was listening myself the podcast from episode 2, so I want to try and not repeat what's been said there from season 2. Season 2, you said? Yeah. And trying not to repeat myself, but I was also thinking, what are some things that I didn't talk about? And so I wanted to spend a little bit more time today thinking about the idea of escalation and de-escalation, what this means when there is no violence and aggression. And I was thinking about what escalation actually means to me and to the parents that I've worked with in the area of mental health is an escalation of symptoms. It's not that fight that you might have. Sometimes it might be, but often it's not a fight. It's either the young person withdrawing, which is something you and Peter were talking about in the previous episode of this podcast, or the symptoms getting more intense, can be really, really difficult for the parents and for the young person. And so de-escalation then in my mind started to become equivalent to reducing some of those symptoms, not necessarily reducing the arguments if they weren't there to begin with. And how you do this, I think in mental health, what parents taught me about how this can be done is that's really, really important to connect. The connecting aspect becomes really essential, I think, in this work. Connecting to the young people's emotional needs, maybe needs that haven't been met due to what they're experiencing in school with their peers, what they're experiencing online, trauma or illness that they have experienced. So what are the needs that over the time have not been met? And also what are the needs of the parent? Because there's something about connecting to the parent's needs and helping the parent to connect to their own needs. So I was thinking that these are two areas that are particularly significant when we're working in mental health.
I guess you're talking here about sort of parents' kind of role in. I'm interested in that escalation or de-escalation of symptoms. So, but also talking about how practitioners can support parents in their needs. Which would you say would come first? Think about our listeners. What in your experience would you need to work with?
That's a really lovely question. I always think that it's not really possible to do de-escalation of the young person's symptoms unless unless we spend time with the parent's needs. And sometimes you hear parents who've had really, really difficult experiences where they felt that professionals somehow, when they talked to professionals, they somehow felt worse about themselves, or they felt that they were doing something wrong. And those are really difficult situations for parents to be in. And somehow we may not mean to do that, but if we somehow create guilt and shame in the parent, how can we then expect them to support their child and listen to them and validate their feelings? So I really think tuning into the parents' emotional needs and unmet needs comes first.
I guess one of the things we've talked a little bit about from the space training as well is about understanding some of those cycles of interactions that can happen. One of those can be the accommodation cycle, and how in some ways if we can externalize these patterns away from the parent and also from the child and see that being the problem, the interaction pattern, and not a flaw in the parent or a problem in the child. Do you think that's the kind of thing that might also help, as well as tuning into parents' unmet needs, but also what's happened in their attempts to try to come to some solutions?
Absolutely. I think they're actually connected to one another somehow. And when we look at that cycle, whether that's an accommodation cycle, which can often be in anxiety, sometimes with eating disorders, and even with young people with very low mood, that tendency of the parent to protect them, which is We know that this is a very natural feeling for any parent, really, and how that might lead to accommodation. But sometimes it may not be accommodation. It might be avoidance, because something is really, really difficult for the parent and they can't bear to address it or to do something about it. And so I think looking at that cycle, and as part of that cycle, looking at what comes up for the parent in those moments. What is it that's coming up? Is it huge fear that they might do something wrong and make their child feel worse? Is it guilt that they really feel that they should have managed it or done something better? Is it, fear that other people will judge them for not being good enough? Is it a worry about what will happen to their child? What are the emotions that are coming up for this parent in those moments, which are really, they can be really intense? And then, as a response to those fears or anxieties or worries, what is it that I do? And how is this helping or not helping? And the not helping might be what's part of the cycle that you mentioned. So even though it comes from a place of really good intentions, of wanting the best for me and for my child, sometimes the things that I might do may turn out not to be so helpful.
And when you think about what the parent does, do you think that that's linked to make a contribution to the escalation of the symptoms? So some of the things that the parents may inadvertently do may result in an escalation of symptoms. Is that what you're sort of? Because I'm really interested in this idea of the escalation of symptoms, not behaviour.
I think
And de-escalation of the symptoms. How do we get to a de-escalation of symptoms?
how do we de-escalate symptoms? I think I need to be very clear here that I think all the parents that come to me, they're doing nothing but their best to help their young people, and they're so committed that they will see a therapist every week or every other week. So it's really important that parents know that they're not causing the symptoms. They're not the cause of their parents' symptoms most of the time. Sometimes, and they're not trained professionals. So sometimes, however, in our attempts to protect our children from feeling distress, especially for those parents who are very, very tuned into their children's distress, we might not do things that we might avoid doing certain things, or not do certain things that might allow the illnesses to be in control. And it could be that we don't have the knowledge, that we don't have the experience, that these illnesses are really, really powerful. And so, whereas I don't think of parents as causing it in any way, I do think that there are things that parents can do that can disempower the symptoms, that can start to reduce the symptoms. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
What's interesting about what you're saying, Vasi, is this idea of, as a practitioner, you might really have to do the NV part of NVR in terms of tuning into what the parent needs. But actually, what the child might need from the parent is the more resistance parts, the part that's, shows that real strength, that action, that immovability from the parent. So it sounds as though in tuning into the parent, what you're also offering the parents is the confidence to resist.
I think so. I think it's a gentle kind of resistance. And I think it's doing more than saying. I was thinking, firstly, what does de-escalation mean, but also tuning into the emotions of the parent is, in a way, already resisting something. It's resisting how the illness wants to define the parent and how the illness wants to define the relationship.
So if the parent resists the illness in their own identity, what would the parent then look like? Or if they're resisting the illness, contaminating their relationship with their child, what does that look like? What does that look like in day-to-day life, in your eyes, or in the work you've done thus far?
I want to hope. I suppose my hope for parents in those situations that they will feel less shame, less guilt, that they will feel more less helpless,
Mm-hmm.
that they will be able to resist the disconnect that happens between them and their child. That's what I visualize a parent. That's how I visualize a parent who is able to resist the.
And I'm just thinking, as you're talking about that, kind of like the gentle kind of resistance that you're talking about, imagining some parents whose child maybe is withdrawn into their bedroom or really controls their parents' interactions when they go out so that they're not drawing too much attention to them. Just thinking about how parents might then, go shopping or go and eat somewhere and can be themselves, whatever themselves is, and not be controlled by whether it's an anxiety or a fear that's, the illness, and really sort of, be in their skin, be comfortable in their skin. And what does that show their child if they're comfortable in their own skin as an act of resistance? That's sort of what I'm imagining. How do they order that coffee or that tea, or go shopping with their child who may be really body conscious, and be able to speak it without tutting or getting choked on their words, just showing their child different clothes that they might like, or say, look, will you come with me to choose something for myself? I haven't bought anything for a while. How can they occupy these spaces with their young person? I suppose that's what was as a form of gentle, kind of gentle resistance.
I love that. Hearing how does this show when you talk, or how? Yeah, I think that would be a wonderful conversation to have with parents who wish to occupy those spaces where they're not controlled by their children's challenges. Yeah. How would your voice sound? What colors would you wear? Stand? All those amazing questions. Yeah. How would you order your coffee? Coffee always features in my.
And that kind of disobedience to being controlled or silenced by the illness. I think that can be symbolic of that, can't it? That we're going to go out, we're going to handle this together. We're going to get over this. We're going to drive somewhere. You might not know that you haven't been there, for a long time. You might worry about who you might bump into from school, or all of those things. But we're going to weather this. We're going to be a bit disobedient, or I am going to be, and I'm going to show you through my eyes, through my body language, through my tone of voice, that we can handle this. So I guess that disobedience to and occupation is such a huge part of the resistance movement, occupying spaces and places that have been there have been barriers to those. If we think about the civil rights movement, the freedom to move around and occupy spaces and be visible, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I was thinking along those lines as well. What was coming to mind when you were saying that was, those different levels of vigilant care that Aylmer talks about. and what they mean in situations when there isn't violence, where there's other situations going on. It might be for a mother of a child who's struggling with eating disorders that she spends more time in the kitchen, that she will choose to cook the meals and will choose to sit with their child in ways that maybe she wouldn't have done for a teenager before. That's just being there, occupying spaces where the eating disorder might have pushed her out of.
What do you think parents need to be able to occupy these spaces or to be more vigilant, Rossi?
It's a hard question. It's a hard question. I remember working in mental health in inpatient settings and thinking about this as a staff team when we had young people who were getting a bit stuck and thinking maybe we could use NVR. Maybe we could use NVR to help them out. But how do you start when someone is so unhappy with their lives and they want out? Or and I remember thinking one of the things that we did as a team was to think about baskets in a slightly different way. So we didn't put the symptoms down in the baskets. We put the things in the baskets that were stopping the young person from getting better. And that might have been not getting out of the bedroom to spend time with their peers. It might have been not opening up in therapy with psychology. It might have been, all sorts of not engaging at all in their education on the unit. So I think that's a really good starting point, really. Where do you start is what is getting in the way of the young person becoming a little bit better.
And would you, in terms of prioritising, then begin to think about what are the priorities in helping the young person to get better? What are what are the priorities that need to change?
Yeah.
Is that what you're?
Yes. So we would be thinking about those then. Of course, we know that in the context of an eating disorder, the priority is eating. So that would be a very clear, I suppose, situation. But when there's anxiety or low mood, where do you start? You can't say your child, I will not accept your anxiety, or I will not accept your low mood in the way you see yourself, or the thoughts that you have about your life. But you can say, I will do everything I can to make sure you get better. And part of that is I will make sure that I spend more time with you, or I will make sure that we have people visiting in our house. I will not stop letting people into our house. I will not stop going out. I will take care of myself and I will go out and get that nice cup of coffee.
So it also sounds as though the announcement might be a little bit different as well in these. Do you think that would need to be a more gentle kind of resistance, the announcement from the sort of the announcements that's used with young people where there's more aggression and violence?
I think so. I don't have a particular template in my head because I have found being guided by the parents in how they want to describe what the first step is the most important thing. But I know when we wrote announcements on the inpatient unit that I worked for, the tone was very, very different.
Okay. And I'm just thinking, I know that you really wanted to make sure that we talked about the sorts of this area in a way that you want to extend on season 2. Is there anything that you just want to sort of summarise for our listeners?
That was what I wanted to talk about is the importance of the supporters, which was touched on the previous podcast as well, but and maybe to think with you as well about how when these illnesses isolate the young person, And you and Peter last time also talked about how the families can become very isolated when young people are feeling very anxious, or when young people are suicidal. What happens for the parent? And often what happens for the parent is they also become isolated. So they might feel shame. They don't want to talk about their children's problems because they feel they might be judged, or they just can't bear. They can't bear thinking about it, so they might start avoiding people or situations, or family, or it might be so difficult. Those moments of contact that might be so difficult that they just gradually start doing less and less. So I wanted to also think about support as a gentle resistance.
Okay. Yeah. So that idea that supporters being involved is an act of resistance to the symptoms of depression or anxiety that wants to keep people at bay, keep people away. So actually, that would be a de-escalation of symptoms by having recruiting the safe supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people that can be around the house, so that people that can be safe outing with the family. If the young person could manage that, that is really, I think, essential. And I know you and Peter touched on it, so I don't want to repeat what's been said in previous
Mm.
podcasts, but just how important that step is, and also the importance of witnesses in restoring the parents' sense of who they are. That idea of using others, and an NVR practitioner can help to facilitate that. How we can use others to really witness how difficult things have been for the parent and for the young person, how difficult things have been, but also how much strength and courage the parent has shown by all the little things that they've been doing, and really highlighting that, because I think that's so important in those parents who are really isolated, who might have had their own trauma and they're finding it really difficult to trust other people. That's so important in terms of restoring their faith in relationships, and we always talk about filling our own cups, don't we? Before we can take care of our children. But that's so important. I don't know. What are your thoughts as you're hearing that?
I just wanted to thank you really for bringing this subject matter again to our listeners, and this conversation sort of highlights again how the different adaptations of NVR and that gentle acts of resistance that are bespoke to these internalized presentations are as powerful as those kind of bigger protest gestures that are made out there. So I think you've really, I guess, given me confidence, and I hope given our listeners confidence, to give this a go, to listen to their parents, and their parents' struggle, to use supporters in, in those creative ways, as in gentle ways of resisting, not grand gestures of resistance. And that this is as valid for our young people where we have a pandemic and of mental health struggles, and really to encourage our practitioners to use this in their practice with parents and young people. So thank you so much, Vasi, for your time. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sheila. It's been a joy talking with you.
Thank you. And just a reminder to our listeners again, if you want to have a look on our website at all of our various training, that's we're in the autumn month now, so there's lots and lots of new training courses on. And don't forget, we've got our launch in Birmingham on the 12th of September. So it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.